In this video, I'm going to show you how to write clear, direct, full credit-worthy free responses that are written out arguments, using the Mongols prompt as an example. There are really two strategies for going about this. So first, I'm going to go through how to do this if you have some idea of what you're talking about. And after that, I will go through how to scratch out some points in free responses, even if you kind of don't know what you're being asked. Right, so first, your prompts are all going to look something like this in this class. Evaluate the extent to which the Mongols deserve their reputation as barbarians. Evaluate the extent to which really just means tell me how much this is true. So how much do the Mongols, the thing that we're talking about, I'll go ahead and start highlighting it because I like annotating my prompts. How much do they deserve to be remembered as barbarians? And I'll note that barbarians is kind of a judgy word, so we're probably going to want to define that at some point. In your free responses, you'll be asked to cite 2 reasons for your claim, because a claim without reasons is kind of worthless. It helps to have 2 completely different reasons in support of your claim, or you're going to run into the problem of being really repetitive and losing points that way. One reason should be based on a source, so you'll always have several provided sources. All of them can be used to answer the prompt in one way or another. So pick one, pick the one you understand best, and use that as the basis for the first paragraph of your argument. For your second paragraph, your second reason needs to be based just on your knowledge of history, so on stuff that you've learned from class. Of course, you can use the sources to jog your memory if you're having a hard time coming up with a second reason, but you can't quote or paraphrase them. It has to be like you telling the reader the history, kind of as though you're the teacher and whoever's reading it is the student. All right, so step 1, whether you know things or not in free responses, is to write a clear thesis statement. Your thesis statement needs to include a claim, so like what it is that you're arguing, and briefly, in like 2 or 3 words, identify each reason that you're going to use to support your claim that then becomes the basis of paragraph 1 based on a source, and paragraph 2 based on content knowledge. Your thesis is really the key to your whole free response. If you take a little time on the front end and think about it before you start writing and write something clear and specific there, first you get 2 points, and that's already a great start, but also you create for yourself a roadmap for the rest of your response that makes earning extra points after that pretty easy. This is why I've left a little pre-writing space here, because it's important to organize your thoughts before you start writing, or it all comes out vague and like kind of awful. So to start, how much do the Mongols deserve their reputation as barbarians? Well, if you know stuff from class, then you probably already know that they were really violent. So that's like one reason to maybe consider them barbarians, but you probably also know something about them that was positive, like they reestablished the Silk Roads, or promoted cultural diffusion, or tolerated different religions. So I guess I'll color code this. A chart would have been better here, but whatever. So barbaric is in green, non-barbaric is in blue. I have a couple of reasons to say, like, yes, they were barbaric, but also they did good stuff too. You can write however you feel the strongest, right? So if I had 2 reasons to say that they were barbaric, I might say, like, the Mongols completely deserve their reputation as barbarians. If I had only reasons to say that they were actually like a positive force in history, I might say the Mongols absolutely do not deserve their reputation as barbarians for my claim. Or I can split the difference and write a somewhat prompt. This lets me draw a little evidence from, like, yes, they were violent, but also some evidence from, but also they did some good stuff. Somewhat is actually, in my opinion, the easiest way to go with claims. So we're probably going to go with that. Before I can start writing, though, I need to have a look at those sources, because one of my paragraphs, one of these reasons, has to match something in one of these provided sources. I don't have to use all three. In fact, I can't. I can only use one. So the best strategy is to go through and find a source that I understand that matches something I was planning on arguing anyway. So starting from the top, source 1 says the Mongols ordered corpses of plague victims to be placed in catapults and lobbied into the city in hopes that the intolerable stench would kill everyone inside. Okay, that matches my barbaric reason, right? That seems pretty violent. If I wanted to just go with that, I can stop reading sources at this point and use that for my first paragraph. If I wanted to keep going, if I didn't understand this, if I didn't know what plague was for whatever reason, I could keep reading. I could look at the next source, which talks about Kublai Khan, who came after Genghis Khan, and how he gives Muslims positions of authority in government. The Mongols were not Muslim, so that's pretty tolerant. He has a law prohibiting Mongol nomads from settling on Chinese farms. So the law protects Mongols just as equally as it protects the people they conquered. That's pretty chill. A new legal system in place. That's great. Theater. Okay, so these are all reasons to think that the Mongols were maybe not barbaric. I could stop there, or I could keep going if I didn't understand that source. Source 3 is about the Pax Mongolia. If I know that that's the time of Mongol peace, I know that this is probably something about them not being barbaric too. Source 3 talks about the empire being really big, and that means that the Silk Road networks, which had been dangerous to travel, fell under Mongol control. And then the resulting stability opened these ancient trade routes to a large, undisturbed exchange of goods between people. And if I think that that's a good thing, and I do, that's all a great reason to think that the Mongols were not barbaric. So I've read all three sources. I didn't have to. Now I need to think about what I'm going to write. I'm going to go for the response that I can write the simplest and clearest and in the most detail. Go for the low-hanging fruit. So I'm going to say it is only somewhat fair to remember the Mongols as barbarians. So I've included the prompt in my sentence. That tells the reader that I know what I'm talking about. You have to do that because your response needs to be able to be understood all by itself. And why do I only think it's somewhat fair? So I need some evidence to say they're barbarians and some evidence to say that they're not. My first reason, I'm going to say because they were violent in conquest. I don't need more details than that. That's reason number one. I'm going to use the source from that. But and here I need to pick what matters most to me. Can I write best about the Silk Roads or cultural diffusion or tolerating different religions? You know, in this day and age, I think that tolerance is really important to me, so I'm going to write about that. They were tolerant of different cultures once they had established rule. So that's my second reason. That should be the focus of my second paragraph. Importantly, these reasons are specific. I didn't say because they did some good stuff, but they also did some bad stuff. That's entirely too vague to have meaning. Good stuff could be like, I don't know, they baked cookies? I don't know. You have to be specific. Say what you mean and no more than that. All right, so that alone earns me 2 points. Depending on how things are curbed, sometimes that can even be a passing grade. Sometimes it's close. So let's see if we can get more points. Moving on to my first paragraph. I need to tell my audience what I'm going to talk about first. Just like a lawyer, right? You have to be very, very clear about what you mean. So, First, the Mongols were violent in conquest. That's my topic sentence. Then I get into my evidence. So according to source 1, here I can either quote or paraphrase, right? I can either like pull the exact text that this author used, or I can summarize what it means in my own words. And that's actually way better because it's a lot faster. So according to source 1, the Mongols were in the habit of bringing plague victims into towns they were trying to conquer. So that's a point for source evidence. Next, I need to talk about what that means by putting it into context. So like, just like a teacher, right? You can't assume that your audience knows anything about the Mongols or what it is that they're trying to conquer. And here you need to add any specific detail from class that helps your audience understand what you just said. You can do that by adding a definition, some descriptions. If there's like a for example you want to throw in, you totally can. So we'll go for the easiest thing. The Mongols, what were they? Well, were a group of nomads who, through violent conquest like this, conquered the largest land empire ever to that date in history. Okay, I told my audience something about who the Mongols were. That gets me another point. Now I need to connect all of this evidence to my claim. How does that make them barbaric? This shows that it's fair to think of them as being barbaric because how do I connect this evidence to the word barbaric? Well, I can talk about what the word barbaric means and how this qualifies. That's probably the easiest way to go. So, because a barbarian is someone perceived to not civilized or follow accepted rules of behavior. I hate spelling errors. Okay. By throwing plague victims into cities to use a disease as a weapon, the Mongols were actually engaging in something that would today be considered a war crime, because you can't just go around infecting civilians with disease as a way of like winning a battle. Okay, so that connects my evidence to my thesis. So far I've gotten all the points, yay. Now for my second paragraph. Second, let's refresh my memory on what I said I was going to talk about. Second, they were tolerant of different cultures once they established rule. Okay, so I don't have to add information for my topic sentence. I just need to tell my audience that we're switching gears here. So second, though, the Mongols were tolerant. Okay. Without using a source, here you need to tell me about that, like you're teaching me. So like remember a key point and give it back to me, ideally with a good amount of detail. So once established, the Mongols did not try to change the religion or cultures of people they conquered. Instead, they attempted to learn from these different cultures. So let's put that into context. What does that mean? Well, this means that unlike the torture going on in Europe at the time, The Mongols allowed the people they conquered to live in relative peace. It was unusual for that time period. Okay, so back to reasoning, and we're almost done. How does this prove my point? What does this mean about them not being barbaric? Well, this makes the Mongols more peaceful than most empires are, right? So I should probably just say that. This makes the Mongols more peaceful as rulers than most empires tend to be. Most empires exploit the people they conquer and don't treat them with respect. But because the Mongols were more open-minded, they were actually less barbaric than most empires we study. So again, connecting it to the idea of barbaric, because that's what the whole prompt was about. Okay, so as a last step, it's usually important to go back, read what you wrote, and see if it makes sense. Your response should make sense all by itself without anybody having to look at what you were asked and without anybody having to have learned history beforehand. If in doubt, add some detail. And always make sure that what you actually wrote matches what you said you were going to write in your thesis. Otherwise, you start bleeding points. Okay, so that's how to write a free response if you know what you're talking about. Briefly, I'm going to show you how to do it if you have no idea. So you get to the prompt and say you have not been paying attention in class, for shame. You can still earn points and you should still try to. And you do that in the following ways. First, you need a claim, and the claim has to repeat part of the prompt. You're being asked if the Mongols were barbaric. All of that information is in the prompt, so you can go ahead and write a claim without actually knowing the answer. Evaluate the extent to which the Mongols deserve their reputation as barbarians. Go ahead and write in the Mongols somewhat deserve their reputation. You can do this without knowing anything, and it earns you a point. Yay. I don't feel great about telling you this, but whatever. Now we need to start looking for reasons. Well, the good thing about these sources is that all of them can be used to answer the question. So your next best bet is to look at these sources and spend some time reading them and see if you can find a reason, ideally two, that can help you answer the question. You can't quote the sources in both paragraphs, but you can use this information to come up with a thesis. So even without like really being able to read this very much, we can tell that this is about a lot of death. So maybe they caused a lot of death. Say the word Kublai confuses me here and I don't want to read this one. In this one, I can look and find the word Silk Roads. That should sound familiar. And this is a pretty like user-friendly source. So I would imagine people could read this and at least understand that the Mongols helped people trade goods like horses, porcelain, jewels, silk, paper, and gunpowder. So based on this, I can go ahead and write a thesis. Because they caused a lot of death, but then helped people trade on the Silk Roads. If you do that, you already have 2 points. Maybe you pass, maybe you don't. Ideally, you can write at least one of these paragraphs. Ideally, the one using the source, right? So like if there's a source you understand, just focus on writing this paragraph as best you can. So like according to source 3, the Mongols helped rebuild the Silk Road, and then I can just copy paste this quote into my response. So really rebuild if we're being accurate, but whatever. Okay, so according to source 3, okay, now comes the hard part. If you know anything about the Mongols, or about the Silk Roads, or about long-distance trade, you should put that here in the context box. If you don't, but you have an idea about why this is a good thing, why Silk Road trade and trading all of these things might mean the Mongols weren't so barbaric, then try writing out the reasoning part. If you don't know either of those things, move on to paragraph 2. Second, our next reason was about lots of death, right? The Mongols killed a lot of people. Okay, and again, I feel terrible saying this, but if you have a thesis with a reason, that's 2 points. You get a third point for writing 2 topic sentences, which we've already done, and for citing a specific source. So if you just do that, you already have 3 points, and that's a passing grade. Ideally, you can tell me why killing a lot of people is a bad thing, and maybe why that makes them barbarians. Maybe you know what the word barbarian means, and you can give me a definition here. But like if you create this little outline for yourself, you have at least a slight hope of passing. And you've created yourself a structure where you can kind of build on what you might remember but didn't remember like immediately. Okay. So that said, good luck. Go ahead and write your own free response with the remainder of class.